Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome back to Nocones Garage. On this episode, we're going to continue working on the chassis by fabricating the foot box and working on the chassis side of the front suspension. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the front. So, obviously in the front of this vehicle, not going to be an engine, fuel tank's going to go behind the seats, but we are going to have a lot of stuff, and the big ones that we have to locate now is the steering rack and the front suspension. So we built this jig, and it's going to locate these sleeves that are going to operate the suspension pivots. And so that's, these tubes are going to go in, and this way it still fits underneath the hood. But so the next thing I need to do is reinforce where these rear points are going to be. So what I'm going to do is weld in some plates that are going to have holes in them and captive nuts on the back, and then there'll be a bracket on this. One thing I do need to do is locate the steering rack. I'm going to use the stock Subaru steering rack, but I'm not going to use the stock steering arm location. The stock steering arm location is towards the bottom of the A-arm, which would have the steering rack be located at the bottom. This steering rack is, from ball joint to ball joint, is almost the same as my inboard suspension pivots, so that will minimize bump steer. I want the angle that this arm makes to match the intersection. I want this arm to intersect with the instant center made by the upper and lower A-arms. So I'll do that by fixing this outer to the wheel and then just raising or lowering the steering rack as necessary. If it ends up having to come up some, I'll be able to notch these tubes and reinforce them if it goes down. But one issue with that is this spot here on the chassis, in this front bulkhead area, it fouls on the steering. So I cut this node out, and you can see the flex coupling. I got a U-joint up there, here. This is roughly where this will be. So this node was removed. I put this little section of tube in. I went ahead and fully welded this one in because I need to tie in this pivot point. But that's all the farther I'm going to go on that. Eventually I'll plate off the top of this, put a corner piece in, but I'll do all that after the steering rack's finalized.
So after attaching the tabs for the front suspension using the jig, I think I decided the next time I do this, I'm going to just create a small fixture and attach the tabs to the 1x1 tube on the bench, and then bring the 1x1 tube over and attach it to the car. I'm sure I could have spent a lot more time building a more robust fixture that would have more accurately located the sleeves to the tubes, but given the time I put into the fixture, I just think it would be easier to do it the other way.
So for the inboard suspension pivots, what I'm going to make is a bunch more of these. So I've got a piece of 4130 3/4 OD that I bored out to just over 3/8 ID. And then I've got a piece of 1-inch 120 wall. And then on the ends, I took some 5/8 SAE washers, and I just used the lathe to make them bigger to be 3/4 inch ID. And then that's the pivot. I'll grease them. I'm trying to decide, I might weld on a thick section and put a grease nipple in, so that way I could actually grease them on the car. I've got this same design on the rear suspension of the MG, and it's been that way for 3 years, about 20 hours of track time, and the inner sleeve has no wear. It just looks nicely polished basically, and I grease it about once a season, and so that's what I'm going to do on this. I may upgrade it in the future, but because it's a challenge car, the goal is to keep the price as low as possible, and all these components, using the washers, the little bit of sleeve in this, and the bolts, it's about 70 cents a corner, or a pivot, and unless I went with used rod ends, there's just no other option that gets anywhere close to that cost. So that's what I'm using, so I'll make some more of these now. So it's just got the outer sleeve and the inner. Put them in. So the 3/8 bolt tightens the inner sleeve, that stays stationary. And the outer bushing is able to spin. Weld the A-arms onto these two bushings. That's going to do it for this episode. Join us next time as we move to the back of the chassis and start to work on the rear bulkhead area and get it ready to have the rear subframe bolt on. As always, thanks for watching. The 3/8 bolts and double shear. Of course, that's the one that's stuck.